The feminists, so this kind of theory which was mentioned, namely the feminists in the 1970s and the 1960s in the West, would insist on and would come up with this, what we might say, expression unpaid reproductive work. And they would say that this unpaid reproductive work, they would still insist blindly that reproductive work should be compensated within the family, within the private domestic sphere. So they would not question the separateness or the artificial division between private and public. And that's why they would actually go for status quo. They would not question why on earth is family seemingly constructed as a separate unit to which all of the reproductive work is reduced. This was one of the blind spots and ideological misconceptions. It was the ideology that was embedded in the Western seemingly progressive Western feminism in the 1960s and the 1970s, whose most radical demand was that women be paid for their work within the domestic confines. But this would mean that nothing would change. It would not lead to women's independence. It would not enable them to develop other skills and to pursue other professions. They would still be reconfigured as natural domestic workers. And this was one of the misconceptions of the Western feminism in the 1970s and the 1960s. By just requiring that this be paid, they did nothing. Because this kind of payment would be later on taken on by neoliberal policies, and they would say, okay, women don't have to be free laborers at home, we're going to give them small stipends, like pension credits, you see? And this is exactly, neoliberalism would take on the premise of the Western feminism in the 1960s and the 1970s. And it wouldn't have to go once again into the direction of questioning why this artificial separation and why is it that women should be solely domestic workers and just in one way or another paid minimally for their reproductive work. But on the other hand, if I give you a few examples, it's not, well, please don't take me wrong. When I say socialism, I really mean a diverse system. And one of the things that how reproductive work, not just childcare, but basic home, domestic work would be actually socialized. For example, in Eastern Germany, they would have public laundry houses that would be either attached to factories or outside. And in this way, this would be easily socialized. So it was not really that this would be just a matter of a private home obligation. And if we talk about a complete redistribution of this notion of private and public, think about kibbutzi in Israel, where everything was absolutely socialized and family was completely restructured. So the first thing that we need to think about is dismantling the artificial division between private and public, and not insist on women being paid for their reproductive work. It's about collectivizing, socializing it, and saying women have other choices too. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to put this into perspective. So this kind of Western feminism, which would say it was anarchist, Marxist, but it would actually maintain the status quo, versus major structural changes that would be undertaken by socialist feminists like Vida Tomšič and the rest, who would actually talk about this completely differently. And the answer for you is in Vida Tomšič's works, which have also been digitalized, and you can find them on the internet. I can give you the... I mean, it's impossible to conduct such a detailed analysis. It would take us one day and 3 panels.